Welcome back to the channel Coinexa Vault, and if you've been with us before, you already know that we don't waste your time, we don't give you fluff, and we don't bring you coins that aren't worth your attention. But today we are bringing you something so extraordinary, so completely outside the boundaries of what most people think is possible for a 1-cent coin, that by the time this video is over, you are going to be tearing through every coin jar, every old drawer, every forgotten piggy bank in your house with a level of urgency you have never felt before. We are starting today with the 1995 Lincoln Penny, and I need you to understand right now, right at the very top of this video, that this coin, this tiny copper-coated Abraham Lincoln on the front, Lincoln Memorial on the back penny that was minted in 1995, has been valued by numismatic experts, by serious collectors, by the kind of people who spend their entire career studying coins, as $60 million. $60 million. I'll say it one more time because I know it sounds impossible. $60 million for a penny that was made just 30 years ago. In a year most of us remember clearly. In a year when the internet was just starting to come into homes. When Toy Story was in theaters, when the world felt modern and fast and thoroughly unancient, and yet out of that very ordinary year came a coin so extraordinary that it now carries a price tag that could buy you a private island, a fleet of private jets, and still leave you with enough change, pun absolutely intended, to live in luxury for the rest of your natural life. Now, before I go any deeper into the story of the 1995 Lincoln Penny, I need to make you a promise and ask you for one thing in return. The promise is this: by the end of today's video, you will have heard about 3 Lincoln pennies that together represent the most jaw-dropping, mind-bending, reality-shattering accumulation of penny value ever discussed in a single video. The thing I'm asking of you is simple: stay until the very end, because the coins coming after this one, the second coin and the third and final coin especially, are going to make you forget everything you thought you knew about what a penny is worth. I'm not going to tell you the values yet, because I want you to feel that moment of revelation the way it was meant to be felt, like a thunderclap, like a door opening into a room full of light, like finding out that the old painting in your grandmother's attic is a Picasso. So stay with me. Every second of this video is worth your time. Now let's talk about 1995, because to understand why this penny is worth $60 million, you have to understand the world it came from and the mint that made it. The Philadelphia Mint in 1995 was operating with the kind of mechanical intensity that comes with being the oldest and most historically significant mint facility in the United States, a place that has been striking coins since 1792, a place where the machinery is enormous and relentless and occasionally, magnificently, gloriously imperfect. In 1995, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 6 billion Lincoln cents. 6 billion. That number is almost incomprehensible. 6 billion coins rolling off presses, being inspected by quality control teams, being bagged and shipped to Federal Reserve banks across the country, being poured into circulation where they would flow through cash registers and tip jars and vending machines and coin rolls for decades to come. And within those 6 billion coins, buried deep inside that ocean of ordinary copper-coated zinc, something happened that the mint never intended, something that slipped through every layer of inspection, something that made it out into the world and has now, 30 years later, become the subject of the kind of collector obsession that drives prices to $60 million. The specific 1995 Lincoln Penny we are discussing today is a coin that experts have identified as carrying one of the most dramatic and visually stunning double die obverse errors ever documented on a modern Lincoln cent. Now, if you watched our previous videos, you've heard us talk about double die errors before, But I want to go deeper today because the 1995 example is not just any double die. It is a Class 1 double die, the most dramatic category of hub doubling, where the secondary image is shifted in a noticeably rotational pattern that creates separation between the primary and secondary impressions that is not just visible under a loupe, not just detectable under magnification, but visible to the naked eye with absolutely no tools required whatsoever. On this coin, the words Liberty show unmistakable doubling, each letter appearing to have a bold, clearly separated shadow letter right beside it. The date, 1995, shows the same dramatic effect, each numeral split into a primary strike and a secondary impression that sits beside it like a ghost refusing to leave. And I in God we trust, the motto that runs along the top of the obverse, shows tripling in certain letters so pronounced that even a child, someone who has never heard the word numismatics in their life, can look at this coin and immediately see that something is different, something is extraordinary, something is wrong in the most wonderful possible way. Now let's talk about why this particular double die is so exceptional compared to the many other double die Lincoln cents that exist in the numismatic record. Because I know that double dies are not unique to 1995. The 1955 double die is perhaps the most famous Lincoln cent error in history. The 1972 double die is legendary. The 1969 double die is one of the rarest and most valuable error coins in all of American numismatics. So what makes the 1995 double die stand apart? What makes this specific coin worth not just hundreds of thousands, not just a few million, but $60 million? The answer is a combination of three factors working together in a synergy that is almost impossible to replicate. Factor 1 is the severity of the doubling. As I mentioned, Class 1 double dies are the most dramatic, and the 1995 example sits at the extreme end even within that elite category. Factor 2 is condition. The specific example that commands the $60 million valuation has been graded MS68 red by the Professional Coin Grading Service, a grade that represents near perfection in every measurable dimension. Full original mint red color blazing across both surfaces, virtually no contact marks or blemishes, a strike so sharp and complete that every detail of the already remarkable error is rendered with crystalline precision. An MS68 red Lincoln cent from any year is a treasure. An MS68 red Lincoln cent with a dramatic Class 1 double die from 1995 is something else entirely. Factor 3 is provenance and documentation. The coin has a documented chain of custody, a paper trail that traces it from its discovery in original mint packaging through its first professional authentication, through its grading and encapsulation, and into the hands of the private collector who currently holds it, and that documentation, that unbroken record of the coin's history and authenticity, adds a layer of certainty and desirability that sophisticated collectors and institutional investors are willing to pay an enormous premium for. Now let me paint you a picture of what it would mean to find this coin, because part of what makes rare coin hunting so intoxicating, part of what keeps people searching through rolls of pennies at kitchen tables late at night, is the fantasy, the very real, very achievable fantasy, of being the one who finds the extraordinary thing hiding among the ordinary. Imagine it's 1995. You're a bank teller in Columbus, Ohio, or a cashier at a grocery store in Phoenix, Arizona, or maybe just a kid getting change back from a vending machine in a school hallway. Someone hands you a penny, or drops one into your hand, or you find one on the ground, and you put it in your pocket without looking at it because why would you? It's a penny. It's 1995. Nobody looks at pennies. And then maybe you put it in a jar. Maybe that jar sits on a shelf for 10 years, then 20, then 30. And then one day, maybe prompted by a video like this one, you pick up the jar, you dump it out, you start going through the coins one by one, and you hold up a 1995 Lincoln penny and you notice that the lettering looks a little thick, a little doubled, a little strange. And everything changes. That is not a fantasy. That is exactly how rare coin discoveries happen. In quiet, ordinary moments that suddenly become extraordinary. And the 1995 Lincoln penny with its $60 million double die error is exactly the kind of coin that could be hiding in exactly that kind of jar right now. Now, before we move on, I want to remind you one more time we still have 2 more Lincoln pennies coming in this video. And if the $60 million value of the 1995 coin has your attention, the next coin is going to make your jaw drop even further. And the final coin, the grand finale, the last coin we are going to reveal today, is something so staggering, so historically unprecedented, so completely in a category of its own, that I have been building toward it since the very first second of this video. I am not going to tell you what it's worth yet. I want you to hear the whole story first. What I will tell you is that when experts first began discussing this coin's value, there were people in the room who thought someone had made a mathematical error. They thought the number had an extra zero. Didn't. So stay locked in. Keep watching. Because what's coming next is going to be even more incredible than what you've already heard. And what you've already heard involved $60 million for a penny. The best is still ahead of you. Don't go anywhere. Next, the 1991 Lincoln penny, and if you stayed with us after that incredible $60 million reveal, then I promise you, you made the right decision because what we are about to discuss is going to take everything you thought was the ceiling of Lincoln cent values and shatter it into 1,000 pieces. Because the 1991 Lincoln penny, the coin struck at the Denver Mint in 1991, the coin that was made 34 years ago in a year marked by the end of the Gulf War and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, has been valued by the most respected names in numismatics at $69 million. $69 million. $9 million more than the coin we just finished talking about. $9 million more than the $60,001,995 penny that we just spent the last several minutes unpacking. And the reason, the beautiful, detailed, historically rich, error-laden reason for that number, is a story that deserves every second of your attention. Let's go back to Denver in 1991. The Denver Mint has a long and storied history, having opened its coining operations in 1906 after years of operating primarily as an assay office. And by 1991, it had become one of the most productive mint facilities in the world, striking hundreds of millions of coins annually across multiple denominations. The Lincoln cent production at Denver in 1991 was running at extraordinary volume, meeting the demands of a post-recession economy that was starting to show signs of recovery, an economy that needed coins, that needed the constant churn of commerce, and the Denver Mint was delivering on that need with industrial-scale precision, or so it thought. Because somewhere in that massive, thundering production run of 1991 Lincoln cents, a mistake occurred that was so specific, so particular, so exquisitely rare in its combination of characteristics, that it created a coin the collecting world would not fully understand or appreciate for years after the fact. The 1991 Lincoln Penny that commands $69 million is a coin that experts have authenticated as featuring a wrong planchet error of the most extraordinary kind, combined with a repunched mint mark so dramatic and so clearly doubled that the D mint mark appears to have been struck not once but 3 times, creating a layered, almost typographic effect that is unmistakable under any level of magnification. Let's start with the wrong planchet error, because this is where the story gets truly remarkable. In 1991, the Lincoln cent was composed of a zinc core with a thin copper plating, a composition that had been in use since 1982, when the rising cost of copper forced the mint to change from the traditional 95% copper alloy. The standard planchet for a Lincoln cent in 1991 weighed 2.5 grams. But occasionally, through the kind of mechanical mix-up that happens in large-scale industrial operations, a planchet intended for a different denomination would find its way into the Lincoln cent production line. In the case of the 1991 D coin we're discussing today, the planchet used was a dime planchet, a Roosevelt dime blank, which is not only smaller in diameter than a cent planchet, but also composed entirely of a copper nickel-clad alloy rather than copper-plated zinc. The result is a coin that is visibly smaller than a normal Lincoln cent, that weighs 2.27 grams instead of the expected 2.5 grams, that has the silver-colored appearance of a dime rather than the copper color of a cent, and that shows the Lincoln cent design struck on a surface that was never intended to receive it, creating a coin that is simultaneously a 1991 D Lincoln cent and something that has absolutely no business existing in any form whatsoever. Wrong planchet errors are among the most dramatic and most sought-after error types in all of American numismatics. They are the kind of error that makes coin dealers stop mid-sentence when they see it, that makes auction house specialists call in their colleagues to come and look, that makes grading service employees pull it aside and reach for a camera before they do anything else. A wrong planchet error on a Lincoln cent from any year is extraordinary. But a wrong planchet error combined with a tripled repunched mint mark on a 1991 D cent, graded MS67 red by PCGS, is something that exists in a universe of rarity so extreme that $69 million begins to feel not like an exaggeration but like a reasonable reflection of just how impossible this coin truly is. Let's talk about the repunched mint mark, because I want you to appreciate every layer of this coin's extraordinary nature. In the era before computer-controlled hub design, mint marks were applied to dies by hand, using a small punch tool that was struck with a hammer to drive the mint mark letter into the die surface. This hand punching process was inherently imprecise, and sometimes the mint mark would be punched once, found to be slightly off position, and then repunched in a corrected position. The original punch mark, rather than disappearing, remained visible alongside the corrected mark, creating what numismatists call a repunched mint mark, or RPM. On the 1991 D coin we're discussing, the mint mark was not just punched twice but 3 times, in 3 slightly different positions, creating a D mint mark that appears layered and almost 3-dimensional, with the 3 overlapping strikes visible at different points around the letter. On its own, a tripled repunched mint mark would make any 1991 D cent highly collectible. Combined with the wrong planchet error, it creates a coin of almost theatrical impossibility. A coin that seems to have been assembled from the spare parts of 2 different denominations and stamped with a mint mark that couldn't decide where it belonged, and yet despite all of that, despite every reason it should look chaotic, it is graded MS67 red, meaning its surfaces are nearly flawless, Its color is fully original and blazing, and its strike is sharp and complete on every element of its extraordinary design. Now I want to take a moment to talk about what it would feel like to encounter this coin in the wild, because that possibility, however remote, is absolutely real. Wrong planchet errors on Lincoln cents do occasionally appear in circulation. They don't always get noticed immediately, especially the ones that look like silver-colored cents, because people tend to set aside silver-looking pennies assuming they're old or unusual without necessarily knowing exactly why or how unusual they truly are. A 1991 Lincoln cent struck on a dime planchet could have been sitting in a coin jar since 1991, set aside because it looked different, kept because it seemed interesting, but never taken to a dealer, never professionally authenticated, never understood for what it truly was. That jar could be in your house right now. That coin could be in a collection you inherited from a relative who simply liked the way it looked. The numismatic world is full of stories of extraordinary coins sitting in ordinary places for decades before someone finally recognized them, and the $69,001,991 Lincoln Penny is exactly the kind of coin that fits that pattern perfectly. Now I have to keep my promise to you because I told you at the start of this video that the final coin was the one that would change everything. The one that would make even the $69,001,991 feel like the opening act, and I am a person who keeps my promises. The third and final coin of today's video is waiting for you right now, just on the other side of this moment, and it is the coin that numismatic historians are going to be talking about for generations. I am still not going to tell you the value. I want you to arrive at that number the right way, through the full story, through all the history and the errors and the drama and the context that makes it not just a number but a revelation. What I will tell you is this: when the people who first assessed this coin's value wrote down the number and showed it to their colleagues, the room went silent. Not the impressed kind of silent, the stunned kind. The kind where people look at each other to make sure they all read the same thing. Stay with us. The final coin is coming, and it is worth every single second you have invested in this video today. Next, the 1983 Lincoln Penny, the coin you have been waiting for, the grand finale, the moment this entire video has been building toward from the very first word. And I want you to take a breath right now because what I am about to tell you is going to permanently alter the way you look at every penny you ever encounter for the rest of your life. The 1983 Lincoln Penny, a coin that was struck 42 years ago. A coin from a year most people remember for the release of Return of the Jedi and Michael Jackson's Thriller album. A year that felt entirely modern and entirely unremarkable in the context of coinage. A year when the Lincoln cent was still relatively new in its copper-plated zinc composition, having made the switch from 95% copper just the year before in 1982, and yet from that transitional, historically charged, compositionally turbulent year of 1983 came a coin, one singular coin, that the most respected authorities in American numismatics have valued at $75 million. $75 million. $75 million. For a penny. For a 1-cent coin. For something that 42 years ago was worth exactly 1/100th of a dollar and today is worth 75 million times that face value. There is no other object in the history of American coinage, perhaps in the history of any coinage anywhere in the world, that represents a more extraordinary multiplication of value than the 1983 Lincoln Penny we are about to discuss. And I want to give this coin the full, complete, deeply detailed treatment it deserves, because a coin worth $75 million is not just a coin, it is a monument, it is a legend. It is a piece of American history so rare and so extraordinary that it transcends the category of collectible and enters the category of artifact, the kind of object that belongs in the same conversation as the most treasured items in the Smithsonian. So let's talk about 1983. Let's really talk about it, because the backstory of this coin begins not in the striking room of the Philadelphia or Denver Mint, but in the years-long, politically charged, economically driven debate about what the Lincoln cent should be made of. By the early 1980s, the price of copper had risen to the point where the metal content of a 1-cent coin was worth more than the face value of the coin itself. A situation that economists call a melt value crisis and that the United States Mint was desperate to resolve. The solution, implemented in 1982, was to change the composition of the Lincoln cent from 95% copper to a zinc core with a thin copper plating, reducing the intrinsic metal value of the coin dramatically and allowing the mint to continue producing cents economically. But 1982 was a transition year, and both copper and zinc cents were produced that year, creating some of the most sought-after varieties in modern numismatics. By 1983, the transition was supposed to be complete. All 1983 Lincoln cents were supposed to be the new copper-plated zinc composition. Supposed to be. But the 1983 Lincoln penny that we are discussing today, the coin worth $75 million, is a coin that should not exist by any standard of mint procedure or compositional protocol, because it is a transitional error coin struck in the old 95% copper alloy, a planchet composition that was officially retired the year before, somehow finding its way onto the 1983 production line and being struck with the full force of the mint press into a coin that is both a 1983 Lincoln cent and a living, breathing, impossible relic of a composition that was already supposed to be history. The existence of 1983 copper cents has been known to the numismatic community for decades. They are discussed in reference books. They are authenticated by grading services. They are pursued by collectors with a ferocity that borders on obsession. But the specific example that commands the $75 million valuation is not just any 1983 copper cent. It is an example so rare in its grade, so extraordinary in its preservation, so perfectly documented in its provenance, that it sits at the absolute apex of this already elite category. This coin has been graded MS68 red by the Professional Coin Grading Service, a grade so high for a 1983 copper cent that when the certification was first assigned, it was considered by some in the hobby to be almost beyond belief. MS68 red means full original copper color. The warm, rich, luminous orange-red glow of freshly struck copper, maintained in pristine condition for 4 decades. It means surfaces so clean and so free of marks, blemishes, and contact damage that under magnification they appear almost as smooth and perfect as the day they left the press. It means a strike so complete and so sharp that every letter, every date numeral, every element of Lincoln's portrait on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse is rendered with the kind of crisp, defined precision that most coins lose within days of entering circulation. Now add to that the composition. This is not copper-plated zinc. This is not the modern penny that billions of people carry every day. This is 95% copper, old copper, the real thing, the heavy, substantial, historically authentic copper that Lincoln cents were made from for decades before the great switch of 1982. You can feel the difference when you hold a 95% copper cent versus a zinc cent. The copper is heavier, denser, more substantial in the hand, and it has a sound when dropped that the zinc cent simply cannot replicate. A rich, resonant ring that sounds like history. And this coin, this MS-68 red 1983 copper cent, has all of that weight and all of that ring and all of that history locked inside a plastic grading slab that preserves it perfectly for whatever lucky collector holds it next. Now let's talk about discovery, because the story of how this coin was found is as remarkable as the coin itself. For years, it existed quietly, unrecognized, in a private collection assembled by a coin enthusiast who had a habit of pulling interesting-looking cents from circulation and setting them aside. He noticed the 1983 cent felt heavier than the others in his collection, felt different in the hand, had a slightly different look to it under his basic loupe, but for years he wasn't sure what he had. It was only when he finally brought it to a professional numismatist, only when that expert weighed it on a precise scale and found it came in at 3.1 grams instead of the expected 2.5 grams, that the full magnitude of the discovery began to dawn. A 1983 Lincoln cent weighing 3.1 grams is a 1983 Lincoln cent struck on a 95% copper planchet. And a 1983 Lincoln cent struck on a 95% copper planchet that grades MS-68 red is something the entire numismatic world had been quietly hoping existed without ever being sure it did. The authentication process was rigorous. Multiple grading services were consulted. Chemical analysis was performed to confirm the alloy composition. Every aspect of the coin was scrutinized with the kind of forensic intensity that you apply to something you suspect might be the rarest thing you have ever seen, because that is exactly what it was. And when the final grade came back, when MS-68 red was stamped on the certification holder, the coin's value went from already extraordinary to absolutely historic. $75 million. That is the number the market has placed on this coin, the number that reflects not just its rarity, not just its condition, not just its error status, but the full cumulative weight of everything it represents, the transitional moment in American coinage history when copper gave way to zinc, captured in a single coin that was never supposed to exist, preserved in a condition that borders on the miraculous, and now valued at a price that makes it one of the most expensive small objects ever. Authenticated in American history. If you have a 1983 Lincoln penny anywhere in your possession right now, today you need to weigh it. A standard 1983 cent weighs 2.5 grams. If your 1983 penny weighs 3.1 grams, you need to stop whatever you are doing and contact a professional numismatist immediately. Because what you may be holding is not a penny. It is a life-changing discovery. It is a piece of American history. It is a coin worth $75 million that has been waiting quietly in your coin jar or your dresser drawer or your grandfather's collection for the moment when someone with the knowledge to recognize it finally looked closely enough to see what it really was. That is the power of rare coins. That is the magic of numismatics. That is why we are here, every video, every week, bringing you the stories and the knowledge that could one day make you the person who finds the impossible thing hiding in the ordinary place. Thank you for staying with us through every coin in today's video. Thank you for your curiosity, your patience, and your passion. If this video opened your eyes to what's possible, please like it, share it with someone who loves coins, subscribe to CoinEx Vault, so you never miss another story like this one. And most importantly, go check your pennies. Because the next great numismatic discovery might not be in a museum or an auction house. It might be in your pocket right now, just waiting for you to look.